In this lesson, we'll talk about projecting detail from one mesh into another. So we talked about remeshing. Let's talk about projecting. And projecting is just ZBrush looking at one model and projecting the sculpted or painted detail into the mesh of another model. So it could be because you've created UVs on a different model, or you've changed the topology of the low res and you need to project the work that you've already done into a new mesh. So in this case, let's say that we want to combine several of these subtools into a single tool, but still keep all of the detail that we've created. So in this case, we've got eyes, some pieces for the inside of the eyes, and then the body itself. So I've got everything else turned off. I've gone ahead and saved this as 24 begin. If you want to start from this point, you could use this, or you can open up another file and use something else that just has multiple subtools in it. But in my case, I want to take, so basically 1, 2, 3, 4 of these subtools and combine them together. So the first thing I'll do is remesh them. So I've got the only tools that I want to remesh visible. I'll turn on remesh, and I'm going to go ahead and increase this amount a little bit. And it'll be a little bit of trial and error. It's not symmetrical, so I'm going to turn off symmetry, and we'll go ahead and leave polish as is. So let's go ahead and remesh and see what happens. So it's going to go through the process of combining those, and you can see that it actually is pretty good about following the shape of the model. But you can see I don't have really any detail in it. Now we can play with the resolution. Now if this is a little bit too high res, and you'll find it down here at the bottom, this may be a little bit too high res. So you could come down and let's come back up here. Going back down to remesh, maybe we want to lower that back down. Maybe we want to leave it where it was and try remeshing and see how that goes. Okay, I think that's actually going to work fine. So now we'll go down to our remeshed object, and it's fairly low resolution. You know, it doesn't have enough polygons to hold the shape that that we had there. And so what we want to do is we could subdivide it a few times until it gets an appropriate amount of geometry in here. Do a few more times here. Maybe one more. That's going to have plenty of resolution. Now, in some cases, you may want to come in if you've got a model that is a little bit off of your original. You can always come in and just kind of tweak it so it matches up a little bit better. So you want it to be fairly close to the underlying geometry. So what we want to do now is go through and project the detail, the sculpted detail and the color into this new single mesh. So to do that, under remesh, you'll find a group for project. So this is project all, it's a very big button, and then there are some options around it. We're going to go ahead and start with just the default settings and hit project all. It's going to say one or more of the visible subtools contains polypaint data, and it's going to ask us if we want to actually include that, and we would, so we'll say yes. So projecting sometimes can take a little while, so it's going to go through that process of thinking about projecting the detail through to this new mesh. So here you can see the result. Now there are a lot of these areas where it actually looks like it worked, and it did work, but there's some also areas where it missed. And so looking at this distance, I'm going to actually go ahead and set this up. So let that finish for a second. Okay, so let's undo that. And let's change this distance. So let's start, I'm just going to make this, instead of 0.02, I'm just going to make it 0.1 or 0.2. And let's try it again. It's going to give us the same option. If you don't want to see this again, you can say, I always want to say yes to this, and let's skip it next time. So now it's going to go through again and project using the new projection distance. So it's going to be able to look a little bit further to find detail to include in the new projection. So we'll let that think about it for a second. All right, so there you can see that with that distance, immediately we don't really see a lot of artifacts on this. Let's go ahead and isolate it. So I'll solo that subtool, the new one that we've created. So this is the new remesh skin that we created. And you can see that it includes the eyes and those little pieces as well, but this is actually one tool, and it's not separate meshes as if we would have just taken those subtools and merged them together. It's actually one mesh with a subdivision level history. So if we go into geometry, we start to dial this down, we can see that the whole thing gets dialed down to a lower level. Okay, and if you start with something that is a little bit lower, you can get your lower level as well. Sometimes you can come in, depending on the object, and you can try to reconstruct a lower subdivision level. Here, we can't do that. Okay, but if you've got something that is has been subdivided before, and you've lost the lower levels, you can come back in and reconstruct those levels. So here we've got now all the detail, including polypaint, projected into this new mesh, which contains the four of the subtools that we were working with previously. So it's a good way to sort of consolidate different tools into one subtool if you need to, one seamless object, so there's no internal geometry on that. You can kind of start to merge things together. Okay, so the idea is that you've taken the detail from the high res, this piece here, and you've now projected it and matched it up, matched the remeshed geometry up with that original mesh, including any other subtools that happen to be visible. So if we wanted to do the ooze and slime, we could have left that visible, and that would have been included in our new projected mesh. Okay, and anytime you come in here and you need to do something on a particular on your mesh, but it can't have subdivision levels. A lot of times you'll freeze those subdivision levels, which will allow you to do that work, and then when you unfreeze it, it's going to automatically go back through and reproject the geometry through there. So the projection actually happens in several places here in ZBrush when we're working, and we need to get that high resolution detail projected back into another mesh. It's going to use that projection technique. Okay, so that's the main idea behind projecting. Kind of goes hand in hand with remeshing. It enables you to combine different tools together and also just modify the topology of your lower res mesh and then reproject that detail into it. So in the next lesson, let's take a look at some ways that we can do a little bit more kind of hard surface modeling. So we'll look again at slicing, we'll look at clipping and polishing, and talk about extruding edge loops, or extruding faces using edge loops. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that next.